Cricket has never finished at the close of play. It lives in the arguments, the memories, the comment sections. Cricket makes you talk. Combox is entering that chat. Hello everyone, welcome to Combox. Jarrod Kimber here for the Wagon Wheel show where we answer your questions on cricket. It's funny, I say that every week and yet somehow I forget what I actually do every week on the show. But it is quite genuinely, both of these things, answering your questions on cricket. The best way to ask the questions is if you're watching live on YouTube, you can just put up super chats. If you're not watching live on YouTube, the best way is to support us on Patreon. So you can find Good Areas podcasts and you'll be able to support us there, which helps you ask questions for this show. Like Neil has when he says, do you think Prasidh Krishna's red ball prospects are held back by him not having the wobble ball in his arsenal? No, I don't think... I think that, look, it's a fantastic delivery and it has obviously changed cricket as much as maybe outswing did. Maybe West Indies back at the length. Like it's one of the most monumental shifts in fast bowling we've ever seen. But doesn't mean every single bowler has to have it. Also doesn't mean that you have to have it at, I don't know how old would he be, but he's still young. He's got plenty of time to learn it. What you can't learn is to have really, really long arms and decent pace, right? And energy off the pitch. So no, I would never rule out a player who doesn't have a wobble ball. I think that would be a silly way of looking at it. I mean, you could argue in the future you want more variable attacks than just 4 wobble ball bowlers, which teams are already doing. 3. Will says, do you think an NFL red zone style show would work in cricket with a show providing a central stream of the 4s and 6s and wickets of a day's play across numerous games? Yes, so County Cricket tried this, didn't they? Was it the BBC? Tried this at one stage for the Blast, I believe. I want to say Norcross. Was Finney involved? Someone else as well. But yeah, they did try it. The problem is, Will, the only way that you could do it is to get all of the boards involved if you want international cricket. And there aren't that many multiple games played on the same day outside of something like county cricket, right? So it's just tricky. The overall concept, I think everyone's trying to look at it, but I think that there is a reason why it works specifically well in the NFL. I'm not an expert or anything, but so many games are played at one time. I think that actually helps the red zone, right? Satchmo says it's too far out to make a meaningful predictions about Ashes 27 squad competitions. Yeah, I did a small video on my channel on the Instagram the other day, Satchmo, where I was basically like, if you look at Australia, no one knows who's going to open for them. Number 3 still a slight question mark. Number 4 is quite an older player. We don't know if Travis Head's going to bat at 5 or open. Carey's come up to 6, but that's probably not a long-term thing. Certainly by 2027 might not be there. And then you've got old bowlers and old all-rounders, right? And Cameron Green's one of the few younger players, and there's a question mark on him. That's the team that won. So yeah, I don't think you can make anything meaningful this far out. I do think Harry Brook will be playing. There you go. Bold. Ben says, if Brian Lara had the drive, thirst for runs, and crafted every aspect of his life to make it runs like Sachin did, how good could Lara have been? Could he have got up to second all time? Could he have somehow put pressure? Or put Bradman under pressure? Yes, he goes second all time if he's that kind of person. The only other issue he has is, I suppose he would have needed to... Well, he had a pretty long career, wasn't he? What, 91? Yeah. His career isn't quite as long as Sachin and Bradman and Hobbs. But that level of performance for that long probably gets him past Hobbs and Sachin. I don't think he puts any pressure on Bradman. I think that if he trained hard, tried hard, was motivated, and was paid a lot of money to play Test cricket, I have no doubt in my mind that he could have averaged over 60. Maybe not like 68 or something, but 61 or 62. And that was a tough era, although he does play in the softer era at the end as well. Reese says, which of your top 10 batters would have struggled the most in the wobble ball era? Besides Smith, I suppose, considering he actually played in it. Would have been interesting to see how Viv Richards would have gone against it, just because of playing across the line so consistently. Having said that, Steve Smith does that. And also, you watch Viv and he does like to drive on the up, doesn't he? Quite a bit. So that, maybe that could have caused the problem. Did he play outside of his eye line a little bit? Was he one of those guys who liked to hit the ball in front of him? I'd have to go back and have a look at that. Those players have probably struggled a little bit more on the wobble ball. I'm trying to think of who else. I can never remember the actual list. I don't think it would have been an issue for Bradman. I don't think it would have been an issue for Tendulkar. Hobbs is probably the best suited to it, right? Just because that's the era and he plays. Like, as in, there was a lot of seam movement when he was playing still. Hutton, I think, would have been okay. Gavaskar, I think, would have been okay. So, yeah, Viv might have had... It would have been interesting to see Callis as well, by the way. But Viv is the one that comes to mind, and I'm not sure about Sobers. It's a good question. Jonathan says, does luck play a greater role in T20 cricket than other formats? With everything designed for close finishes, it seems a lucky shot that misses fielders can really influence the result. Yeah, it's huge. I think it was Freddie Wild, who's the RCB analyst, but has obviously been an analyst for England as well. He tried to look into this. It might have been for the book he wrote with Wigmore. And I know we tried to look into this a little bit at Cricinfo as well. It's definitely I think in Test cricket, there's always luck in any sport, right? But Test cricket is probably a sport that you would say is low on the luck factor, because eventually it should even out over a long period of time. Whereas in T20 cricket, so the first analytical article I wrote was more about like how we judge who the best player in a game is in T20 cricket. And it was a game where Moses Enriquez was the best player, who played a streaky innings where he hit 3 balls straight up in the air and was dropped. And I was sort of saying that, like, there was probably better players on the other side in this game than there was in him, who won the game. I think it might have been a Sydney Sixers versus Thunder game or something like that. And I remember when I wrote it, and Sam Ball went nuts. He's like, this is not what we were talking about. And I was like, well, it is. I need to get to the core of what we're looking at here. And fundamentally, this was not a good innings, right? And so it was just lucky. And so once you start to do that, you start to look at things very differently. MF Jim says, are Japan, Scotland, and Tanzania leading the way in incredible kits, or are they just a bit different compared to most of the other nations? Shout out to Ireland for a very classy looking kit. Yeah, Ireland's done some good work. They've had some poor ones. I think Scotland have had some rippers, haven't they? I think, I've never heard my dad ever want a cricket shirt before, and I think Scotland was the one he asked for. And I worked for them. I still don't know if I ever got him one. I'm trying to remember what Tanzania's is. Why can't I find that? Yeah, Tanzania's okay. I would have thought UAE, the recent UAE kits are incredible, right? I really like those. I can't remember the Japan one standing out all that much. But yeah, I think we could do better with kits. I think we're still working our way there. Crate says, who would you have as the best test batter of the 90s? Lara, 64 matches. Average of 51, match factor of 1.52. Tendulkar, 67 matches, about the same amount of runs, average of 58, match factor of 1.51. And Mark Waugh, 6,200 runs, an average of 53, match factor of 1.5. Tendulkar has the highest average. Lara has the most iconic knocks. Is it Mark Waugh you meant, or Steve Waugh? Oh, I think he means Steve Waugh. I saw Waugh M, and I was like, does he mean Mark? I was like, those are great numbers from Mark Waugh. He must have really dropped off. So there's a big difference between Waugh and the other guys, and it's the position that he comes in. So they are doing a lot more heavy lifting in that situation. I think I probably have Tendulkar ahead of Lara in the 90s, and I have Waugh at third. I think that's probably where I come from it. Outside callers, Anwar, Gooch, Cullen, and Mark Waugh. Well, at least Mark Waugh eventually made it. Anwar was fantastic. He just missed out on our book, and it was unlucky, but I couldn't quite fit him in there. Gooch just missed out on the book as well. Cullen, I actually tried to talk to Daryl for the book. You take Shane Warne out, and Cullen's a genius. And Mark Waugh, kind of, again, I interviewed him for the book, and he was kind of admitted he probably should have averaged more. I don't think he quite got the most out of himself at times in Test cricket in the way that he played. But yeah, I think it's Tendulkar, all things considered, on that list. James says, a bowler at 120 to 130 kilometers an hour can probably be considered a genuine quick at a local or maybe Premier grade level, but not at first class or international. If they wanted to progress to such an elite level, would you advise them to focus on less pace and more on control, cutters, slow balls, and other variations, and potentially bowl a little bit slower in order to do so effectively for long spells, or just get better at what they are doing? If they're 120 to 130, I worry about them at first class level, James. So unless they're playing in like New Zealand and England where those wickets are going to suit them, they're going to have to bowl as fast as they can and try and hit the same spot over and over again. If they're in those other places where there is genuine movement, I think you can then have a situation where you can say, yeah, I think at that stage you can have a conversation where you say that you don't need the extra pace, but maybe just on occasions, if you could ramp it up a little bit for us. But realistically, if they're 120, 130 and they're a club player, I'd be looking at just trying to put on 5 kilometers an hour without losing any sort of accuracy issues. And I think then you're probably closer to a first class bowler. I actually played cricket with a guy who bowled about 120, 125 Ks, was very, very accurate, swung it both ways. And I had a chat to him about like how far he felt he was away from the Victorian team. And he said, look, when it comes down to it, I think they think I could bowl with the new ball, but am I ever going to be able to bowl at any other time for them? Right. And he's like, I can be quite nippy and accurate, but they've got all-rounders who can do that kind of job. Right. They can find other people to do that. What they really want is someone who can be a constant threat, you know, for longer and not just with the new ball. And I think if you've got a bowler like that, that's a very new ball dependent bowler, right? They'd have to be like a Trent Copeland level skill player. I'm trying to think of someone else, you know, one of those guys who's, you know, just ridiculously talented. Ajit Pandey says, in football, some tournaments put the head-to-head of that season as the deciding factor before goal difference. So similarly, yeah. So yeah, if teams have the same, I think we do that also. They do that also in the NBA, don't they? Would it be fairer to place them higher, or do you think net run rate is fair because it takes into account the whole campaign? We don't do head-to-heads, which is the issue, right? I think if you've beaten a team in a tournament, and if you've got a 4-team situation, right, and everyone wins 2 games and one team wins 1. Is that how it works? I'm trying to think of the numbers there. But you know, one of those ones where you get like 3 teams on the same amount of wins. It's a bit messy with head-to-head at that point, right? But then if you default to net run rate, I think that's okay. But it would take a little bit longer for casual people and people who are trying to work it out to understand it. I kind of like it. I think there's something to it. I think it probably makes more sense in T20 franchises, though, than it does in, say, a World Cup. But yeah. Mob says, is there a case to anoint Darryl Mitchell as the best current utility batter, all formats, all batting positions in world cricket? Travis Head is up there, but his record is home dependent. Daz gets runs abroad. I think he's still picking Head over Mitchell just because of the impact that he has. Didn't Darryl Mitchell... Didn't he have a bit of an issue with his test batting of recent times? I'm just having a look here. Also, he's an okay T20 player. I'm not sure he's a star. Darryl Mitchell. Where are we? Yeah. Averaged 30 last year, averaging 38 in 4 games in 2025 as well. So, sorry, 30 in 2024. I think I'm picking Head over him. And you probably have Shubman Gill in that conversation as well. Jaiswal would be as well. The problem with India, they've got so many top order players, they can't even fit them all in. Am I missing anyone else? I don't know where Harry Brook fits into that as well. Abe says, David Epstein has argued that many great athletes benefit from spending their early years sampling a range of sports, specializing later, since it gave them a broader base of skills to draw on. His example is Federer, and I think De Villiers might be another case. Agreed. If you were designing a junior cricket pathway on that model, which non-cricket sports would you want your kids to play for a few years to maximize the skills that they could bring back to cricket? There's no sport that I would give them, right? It would be just play as many sports as you can, because you don't know what they're going to bring from those other things. It might be stability, it might be core strength, it might be calf strength, it might be wrist strength, it might be lateral eyesight. I don't know what it is going to be, right, from that particular player. So I just want, like, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that hockey would play a big role in a lot of players developing, I would have been like, really? Like, they're not quite the same. And we know that it does now play a role. So yeah, I think for me, it's just trying to get them into different kinds of sports to understand different kinds of things. I think if you play cricket and you don't play any other sport, psychologically, you're not as good at understanding team dynamics. And that is a big problem. If you play basketball or football or netball, there's a natural team element brought into it, which cricket doesn't always have. So I always think those sorts of sports, and also the sort of 360 sports where the ball is around you. So again, all three of those would have that. I think tennis, badminton, table tennis, squash, right? You could throw in paddle if you want now, if that's a real sport. I think they could all be put into those as well. So they would all be really, really fascinating for many different reasons. But like, I just think for young kids, outside of perhaps golf and chess, I really don't think there's many sports that you shouldn't be playing as many as possible until you're at least 15. Ali says, what would you say that the growth of cricket is? Would you say that the growth of cricket is tied to immigration from South Asia? I don't know where exactly you're asking this question for, because I think that's very different for different countries. I think there's plenty of growth that could be made in, say, countries like England, New Zealand, and Australia, and South Africa that has nothing to do with South Asia. You could supersize that growth with more people immigrating from those countries, obviously. But I don't actually think that is the case in those places. But if you look at it globally, yeah, but that's actually what used to happen with England, right? There's no difference. Expats go places and they take the things they like with them, and sometimes they stick around. Like South Africa, well, every test country basically, right, gets cricket from England one way or another. So it would make sense that would be the case with South Asia as more immigration happens around the world. Like, we're seeing it everywhere, right? So yeah, definitely. James says, is hosting tournaments in India viable if visa issues for Pakistani origin players continue? And would any other national boards be in any position to act to move tournaments if they were not viable? Generally, it's always Dubai, isn't it? Similarly, we even see a Basil D'Oliveira or Robin Jackman type situation in a third country. Example, England picking a Pakistani origin player, denied entry for bilateral series, which then collapses. I don't know if we'll ever see that. It's a huge issue. Visas in cricket are a huge issue. I know I go on and people get a bit bored with it, but like, we have one of the most international sports ever, and we don't have anyone helping with visas, and it's a constant problem right across the sport. It's obviously an issue with Pakistani visas into India, and that's not going away. It's usually, from what I understand, most of these things are you have to apply for the visas normally. Right? And this is what I say when visas are a problem. What really should happen is there should be some sort of liaison, right? Especially for professional sports, where it's more embarrassing if you stuff up someone's visa, where they do that. And from what I understand at the moment, a lot of these teams will put their visas in just normally, and then the first thing that usually happens is that the visa is denied. And as someone who's had their visa denied many times from India, it's like, you don't even know why it took me almost 7 years to work out why my visas always got denied the first time in India. And it was just because some guy who worked there recognized me and he took me through it. No one even told me. And so you do have these players from these different, especially Pakistani backgrounds, having these issues. It's something that the ICC should have been on top of. It's something the BCCI should be on top of. It's a bit ridiculous, and it keeps happening. I don't think as far as I'm aware, everyone has always been in the country for the first games. Off the top of my head, apologies if I'm misremembering it, but like even when there have been situations like, was it Shoaib Bashir and Rehan Ahmed? I could be wrong on that, but even they got in, I think, before the start of the match. But like, don't get me, the Indian visa situation department is just not. It's not a particularly well-run system. It doesn't work the way that it should. I feel really bad for the people who work in it. They work really tirelessly, but it's a really hard system, and it does seem, from an outsider's perspective, like it's set up for you to be denied a visa rather than be accepted for a visa. And it's obviously also set up to check if you've got any Pakistani origin in you. So it's not a good system. But yeah, visas in cricket is, after handshakes, visas is going to be the next thing, right? So it could get a lot worse, is my point. Hurt says, growing up in the 90s and 2000s, there was a lot of writing and commentary on having a perfect biomechanical action. Is it a fair statement to say that with prevalent short form formats, the emphasis on perfect action isn't as strong, and unpredictably mystery and guile took its place? I think the second ever podcast I did on this whole network, Hurts, was with Barney Ronayne. And one of the things we were talking about is like that Jofra Archer and Mark Wood have completely different body types, right? And I think Barney was getting nervous because I think he thought I was like sort of saying, black people have this body type, but just look at them. They are completely different physical type of specimens. They're both incredible athletes, but they're not exactly similar kind of shape athletes, right? They don't have similar bowling actions. They're very different in the way that they bowl 150 kilometers an hour. There are some biomechanics that obviously matter. But there are guys who bowl 150 kilometers an hour and don't even have a fully braced leg. Like, I just think that we were searching for something that we thought was perfect. We now understand that there is more variance out there. I think T20 cricket specifically has brought in more of the variances you're talking about, the unpredictability. I wouldn't say that people are coaching for unpredictability or anything anymore, but there is an element, I think, in modern cricket of maybe we do need that. And there was probably a time where everyone was becoming a little bit Brett Lee, Chris Wokes. The Dennis Lilly factory was a big part of that as well, right? We're not seeing that as much. Jeremy says, at this point, I'd rather see Steve Smith in the T20 World Cup than someone like Cameron Green or Matt Short. Is he just out of the squad because the selectors don't want to move younger, or is BPL performances not worth that much weight? I don't think he's out of the squad for his BPL performances. I think he's out of the squad for his international performances. Look, there has been issues with Steve Smith, the T20 cricketer, in the Australian camp for a long time. They wanted him to move down the order. He didn't want to move down the order. They want him to attack more. He doesn't like to play their style. Jeremy, his stats in T20 cricket, 67 games, 1,000 runs at an average of 25 at a strike rate of 125. That's international T20 cricket. His stats in domestic T20 cricket, an average of 32 and a strike rate of 131. The way he's playing in the 100, the Big Bash at the moment, is what they've always wanted him to do. So why has he not done that for Australia? And that's their argument, I think, privately. I think they think he's wonderful. I think they want this Steve Smith. But he's decided to do this very, very late. He has actually done it a little bit in the Big Bash, but he hasn't brought that to international cricket at the moment. And look, he has a lot of trouble with letting go and letting his freak flag fly. I said one of the first analytical things I ever did was I realized how good he was when he was in at the end of T20 games, right? He just doesn't do it all that much. In the 100, last year he averaged 20 with a strike rate of 129. I don't know if he's played much other things recently. But yeah, his numbers are disappointing overall. And so he's decided that now he's going to play the way that they wanted him to play before. If he'd been playing this way all the time, Jeremy, he'd be the first person on the call sheet. Team sheet. He might be an actor, I don't know. PJ says, no question, but your previous mentions of how there should have been a proper A-League with set schedule got me dreaming about how great that would have been if associate teams would have been allowed to take part in that league as well. with all matches fully first class. It's nice to dream. Yeah, when I started writing about this, PJ, it was 2008, and that was part of it, that you would probably have Australia, England, India would have afforded it, and they would have toured places like Ireland, Scotland, Namibia. There's someone else that I had on my list back in those days as well. Played those sorts of places, but also played, Sri Lanka A and New Zealand A and everywhere else. But they would kind of be the touring team, which kind of makes more sense because your players should know how to play at home already. So it's a big advantage for the teams who have money. Yeah, there's lots of things we could have done, PJ. Instead, we did not. Abe says, answer one of those. You've probably answered this before, but I've probably answered this before, but why haven't retractable roof stadiums taken off in cricket the way they have in the NFL or MLB? Oh, this is easy. This is the easiest question in the world to answer, Abe. How many major days of cricket a year does Lords have? Right? They get 2 tests. They get maybe a couple of white ball games, so that's 13. Let's give them, what would they have, 600 or 700 games now? That's 20 days a year. 20 days a year. They're not making a lot off the 100 games because of the overall. Most international grounds in the world are not getting anywhere near 20 days of major cricket a year. I'm no expert, Abe, but I would say in baseball, you get about 82 home games a year. That's the big difference. NFL is slightly different. But there's so much more money in NFL as well. And also, remember in America, who pays for a lot of those stadiums? Quite often, it's also paid for by public money. In cricket, it's a lot more different and a lot trickier the way that grounds are made, right? So there's lots of things going on. The other thing is that we spend a lot more time looking into how to we haven't really ever just consolidated the grounds, I suppose is the best way of putting it. And if we consolidated the grounds, rather than making it go on this big carousel the way we do at the moment, you probably could do this. The other thing is that the NFL and Major League Baseball did have a lot more money, like in the way that they were run. That's not quite the case anymore, but still is the case. I would assume most of these teams are owned by billionaires. Abe. And outside of the IPL, there's lots of people who are not billionaires who own franchise leagues, right? So we're just getting to that billionaire level. The other reason is that cricket grounds are bigger than baseball fields and then NFL fields. I think I'm right in saying this. It's not impossible because obviously we have one in Australia, but that's only there for Aussie rules football because they play a lot of Aussie rules football there. But even then, they've only got one. But when they put that in, that was really, really expensive. And so when Lords, I think Edgbaston, I don't know if the SCG is, no, the SCG hasn't won. There's another ground somewhere that has looked into this. The original prices were ridiculous. We are now getting to a point where they are much more financially available. But the final issue for cricket is that the Renegades pitch has been dog shit, right, at Docklands consistently. Australia still doesn't play international cricket there. It just hasn't quite worked the Docklands, right? And so the one time we did it, it hasn't been perfect. And I think that also holds it back quite a bit as well. Leo says, I only started following cricket in the late 1990s. Have there been any team regimes throughout history that has been as dogmatic in their approach as England under McCullum? How dogmatic were the Great West Indies teams about not playing a frontline spinner? Yeah, pretty dogmatic, Leo. It starts late, actually. I think in the 1980s is maybe the best one to have a look at for that. Let me just have a look. I would say, I would argue that they don't have a frontline spinner in the 1980s for more than a handful of tests. I'm trying to think if maybe they did in Asia. So if we go to the West Indies, and we go to the 1980s, and we look at all of their bowlers. I'm just going to have a look here. So these are people who've taken more than 10 wickets. Bishop, Daniel, Gray, Benjamin, Richards, Harper. So Harper is the one that sticks out. So Harper has 45 wickets in 24 matches in the whole decade as their frontline spinner. But I think Harper is also picked because he can bat a little bit and was the world's best fielder for a while there. Also, there's a bit of, remember in those days you would have an ODI and test squad all together, and Harper was quite often with their ODI squad. Harper's figures in first class cricket are not too bad. So they were pretty dogmatic, the West Indies. They do have a period though. I'm just see if I can. Now I've lost it. They do have a period of using guys like Eldon Baptiste. I'm missing someone else. Bernard Julian. I'm trying to think if there's any others. There might be one or two others in there that I have forgotten that are not out and out jet fast bowlers. In fact, Julian might finish in the 70s. So, yeah. So they're pretty dogmatic. It's 4 fast bowlers pretty much all the way through. And then, yeah. So I wouldn't say that's any different to the England system. And there were probably test matches, if you go back, that they might have thought about having a spinner like retroactively, but they were so good overall. I wouldn't have said that was an issue. Before that, Test cricket was the thing is that Test cricket's actually become a little bit more static, which is why the last 5 or 6 years have been so much fun because it haven't been static. But Test cricket had become more and more static, so you don't have as many swings. But I would say the South African team with all their all-rounders, rather than picking their best 4 bowlers, was probably a good example of that. I'm trying to think of another team. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good example of going that direction. And I suppose the other one would be India playing a lot of spin away from home. But I don't think they were anywhere near as dogmatic as the West Indies, South Africa, or England were. PJ says, who would have had the better career? Oh, sorry. Who would have the better career, and who would you feel more comfortable with taking in a bar fight? Okay. A Temba Bavuma-sized Marco Janssen or a Marco Janssen-sized Temba Bavuma? Who would have had the better career? Marco Janssen-sized Temba Bavuma. If you're Marco Janssen and your left arm and you're bowling still around 90 miles an hour and you can swing and seam it, I think you still have a better career than just a giant Temba Bavuma, don't you? In a bar fight, I would rather go up against a Temba Bavuma-sized Marco Janssen, wouldn't I? Rather than a Marco Janssen. Temba Bavuma-sized Marco Janssen or Marco Janssen. Yeah, I'm not taking on Temba Bavuma if he's like 6'8". Hayden says, how would T20 cricket be different if helmets were never adapted and batters and wicketkeepers were still wearing caps? We wouldn't see scoops and all those sorts of things. We certainly wouldn't see them the way we are. We wouldn't have seen players come down the crease as much. Even reverse sweeps would go down a little bit. Batters would stay in their position a lot more. So helmets have probably made batting more exciting, which is something you don't hear a lot, but it's probably true. Satchmo says, what advice would you give British or Australian sports journalists who are assigned to jobs in the USA while its government continues its current path? For the Football World Cup. I think you have to be realistic. And I think anytime you are reporting on a major sporting event, you are also reporting on the country that you're in. So I was in Sri Lanka when it looked like Rajapaksa might get back in. And I wrote a couple of pieces about what it was like to be there. Even though they were cricket pieces. I think there was one in Wisden where it was about Rangana Haras's final match, but I talked about Rajapaksa and the strong support he had, and how like everywhere you went, there was a picture of him on every street post in that, because I was kind of around Tangal area, which I think is one of his strongholds. And then you get to Gaul and there really isn't much Rangana Haras stuff. And so I don't see that as writing about the political side of it. You're writing about the realistic side of it, right? There are going to be, Latin players and Somali players and other immigrants as well, like people with, immigrant family, whatever, who are going to want to talk about it during this World Cup. I think you have to be honest, and talking about specifically what's going on in Miami and Minnesota. By the way, I went to Minnesota. I don't know if people know this. Minnesota is the birthplace of Cricinfo, and I went there because of that. I made a documentary for Cricinfo about Cricinfo, one of the 2 documentaries that I completely finished and was never uploaded. But yeah, I can't believe this is happening in Minnesota. I've been to a lot of American cities where I was like, there's some issues here and they need to look after it. Red states and blue state cities. Minnesota was not one where I thought, oh, you better send the armed forces in. Crazy what's going on there. But yeah, I think when you're doing that, I think you have to be realistic, right? I think it's the same. I think you have to reflect what is happening in the country while you're writing it. I don't think that means you have to turn yourself into a political writer if you're not a political writer, but I don't think you can ignore things, right? If the country is changing around you while you were there to do your job, I think that is part of it. Neil says, early days, but based on what you've seen, is Nitesh Reddy a legit test number 6 project, given that that will be his role if he's a batter first? Yeah. Don't see any reason why he couldn't bat number 6 in Test match cricket. I think if you were telling me he would be a 4th bowler, I would say he cannot be a 4th bowler. I think he has the eye and the ability to be a number 6. He's very early. The issue I have with him as a number 6 at the moment is not his talent. It's the fact that he just hasn't made any runs in first-class cricket. His List A numbers are a lot more hopeful to me, and I've seen him bat in a good way. I think he has that thing that Zach Crawley, Shane Watson had, which is he has the basic level batting skills available to him, but he doesn't know how to go past 20 to 40 very well. He doesn't know how to build an inning step by step, and that is a thing that, I mean, Zach Crawley's a specialist batter, but quite often happens to all-rounders. Right, the batting talent is not the issue. It's the ability to stack up the runs the way that you want to. Will says, what do you think the average county player would or should prefer? A fortnightly schedule where a first-class match and 2 T20 matches alternate with 3 days rest? Or one where they play a T20 match on a Friday, a championship match on a Sunday to Wednesday, and then another T20 match on a Friday? I mean, the ideal thing is none of those, Will, really, is it? I think the ideal thing is probably separated the 2 formats, if you want to know perfectly. First class match and 2 20 matches with a 3-day rest. I think you probably want more regular rest rather than one big rest. I think that, but that might be different for a batter or a bowler as well. I think if I'm a bowler, if you can give me 6 days off, I can probably come back pretty strong for another week after that. Ben says, has the tipping point already passed of stopping billionaire owners controlling the world game? If not, what could be done by the boards now to stop it? No, it's done. I'm pretty sure it's done. Yeah, I don't think the boards could do it. The only thing that could happen, which is, this is rogue. I don't think it's about to happen, but this is quite rogue. If the BCCI got involved. But I don't know if the billionaire owners aren't just too powerful already. I think it's more their game than it is anyone else's at the moment. And once billionaires get their hands on something, they're not usually great at like letting it go, are they? Reese says, do you think captains have ever altered their plans at the toss due to Virat chasing factor? Seems like he's such a cheat code that some teams would take that into consideration. Yeah, I think they do. I think that probably happened with Dhoni and Bevan as well. I think that's a natural thing, right? Like the same as if you think it's harder to bat under lights against Glenn McGrath or Peak Shaheen Afridi or Wazam Akram or whoever you want it to be, you're going to make those decisions. That's a fairly normal thing, Reese, that captains do, I would have thought. MF Jim says, have Bubba and Rizwan been out of form before this year's bash, or have they just struggled a bit in Australian conditions? Ralph, Shadab, and Zaman have adapted really well in comparison. Also, this has potentially damaged your reputation with how the big bash is viewed in franchise cricket. I would have to go back I mean, Barbara Azam just hasn't ever got back to full form, has he? I don't know. With Rizwan seems to come in little fits and bursts. But if we look at Baba Azam, I don't even know what the last tournament he would have played in. When did he play? 2024. 2025 PSL 36 at 128. Just a little bit under par for him. They're the wrong players. It was a bad decision. There's too many leagues and too many teams that still pick people based on how famous they are, not on how good they are at T20 cricket. I don't feel that much different about Babar Azam than I do about Kane Williamson. What did Kane Williamson? Let's compare them. Actually, this could be fun. So he's in the Big Bash now. He played 11 games, averaging 23 at a strike rate of 103. Surely Kane Williamson did better than that. Kane Williamson, what was the biggest league he played in last year? Was it the 100? No, he's playing in the SA20, isn't he? My God. And he's going at 22 and 120. It's interesting to me that isn't getting very much, and Williamson is. I just think that, sorry, and Bubba is, and some of that is just there's so much media and fan interaction and everything around Bubba Azam. But yeah, I wouldn't have picked either of them. Rizwan I'd have to check, but Ajit says, a bit of a random one, but there's this little discussion you see every now and again about scorecard graphics, colors, font size, player pictures. I was just curious if you personally had a favorite scorecard graphic from a past tournament or specific broadcast. No, you're right. I see this as well. I think on our Discord channel, I think Varun might be in our group, might be the person who likes this a lot. I don't even notice them, if we're being honest. And I think maybe for me, I have seen so many graphics that they're just all blurred together. And it's probably only when something is missing or in the wrong spot that maybe it affects me or I notice it. But no, it's just, yeah, you're right. I'm with you. I see this as well. But it's, of all the things I obsess over in cricket, like sweaters, right? Like the fact that Cricket South Africa was sponsored by anime. This is just not one that has ever gone into my head. Mob says, basketball and cricket seem to feature more bald athletes and hair plug advertisements than other sports. Do you know if there's anything to this, or is it bullshit bias sampling, and in fact every other athlete in every other sport is just getting their hair fixed? So, I think that if you had an NFL player, so there's something about basketball in America. Someone was explaining this to me. It was one of the basketball writers when I was chatting to him. And he was explaining to me that even though basketball is the second biggest sport, not the biggest sport in America, I think that's right. I think it's ahead of baseball still quite substantially. It's actually, when it comes to individual athletes, because of the kind of sport basketball is, and it doesn't have helmets or anything, you see their face, you see their hair. So they're better off to be used in sponsorships than often NFL players are. Also, NFL players aren't actually on the field all that much, right? Whereas a basketball, if you're a basketballer, you're 40 minutes on the court, right? Not to mention you're standing around waiting for someone to take free throws and all this sort of stuff. So I think there's a big element of it. Cricket, I think, has more to do, Mob, with the fact that advanced hair started with cricketers. And so when they got into Greg Matthews, they got into Warne, then they got into Gooch, then they got into Goffey. There's an Indian. Was there an Indian cricketer in that too that I'm forgetting? God, there's another big cricketer I think as well. Did they get? Martin Crowe might have been another one. And I could be wrong, but I think it was all through one company. And so that guy's a massive cricket fan, and I've never. He'd be a great interview actually to try and find him, and I might ask Goffey about him next time I see Goffey. I think it'd be a really fascinating interview to see how it happened and everything. But I think that's the reason, Mob, that we see it more in cricket specifically. But again, I wonder if it's those athletes are on the field for a long period of time. right? So I wonder if there's an element of that involved in it as well. I don't think the ball ratios would be different in basketball than other sports because I can't understand why they would be. At least in cricket or NFL, you're wearing helmets a lot. Baseball, you're wearing hats a lot. Like, I don't know if any of these things have to do with balding. I'm not an expert on balding because my hair's still unreasonably thick. So I'm just maybe not the guy to talk to here. Also, I'm one of those people that doesn't really notice bald people. I don't really notice people's heights or their hair. I've never understood that about me. Hertz says, you named 2008 the year of the balls via the disrespective. If you had to name an eventful year out of this 6 or so years of good eras, which one would you pick and why? Yeah, so that book was the self-published book that I had. I actually had a publisher who wanted it, and then they got afraid of what was in it. It wasn't a normal cricket book. I mean, to be fair, I got nominated for an award this year again because I didn't write a normal cricket book, but sometimes you get these things. So it was a disrespective of 2008 year of the balls. 2024 would be the year, wouldn't it? It would be, I think you'd have to go back. There's like a bunch of podcasts that me and Bayram did around this, but there had to have been, I don't know, the Oh My God Ponies year of 2024 or something like that. I hadn't come up with a great one there. I think I got Oh My God Ponies into Wisden once, but not the English one, the Indian Wisden. But I've never seen a copy of it. It was writing about Angelo Matthews. Ali says, who's the modern version of me and Dad? Who bats like a street cricketer and deploys wily tactics to make runs gathering? I would say that there's not one, there's multiple versions of that now, Ali. I would say Rishabh Pant, Harry Brook, and Travis Head would be the three names that would sort of come straight to mind on that, who are bending what batting is to make it work for them, which is what me and Dad did. And I suppose Harry Brook's got the chance of having the most me and Dad-like career at the moment, but I think all three of them have me and Dad-like elements of just, I am going to do this thing because it makes most sense to me, even though everyone is telling me not to do it, right? Or I am going to come up with ways to score runs that no one has ever come up with before, right? Like all these sorts of things. Yeah, I would say that Brook is the guy that has the most likelihood of having his career. But all three of those guys have an element of what he does in them. It's fascinating matter. Absolutely fascinating. I'll just get to any super chats. Oh, we've only got one in. Beautiful. Ant says, remember Matt Pryor because of his comms and saw he has ridiculous stats for a wicketkeeper. Era inflation. He's a fantastic player. I actually think Matt Pryor was really he should have ended up averaging more, but they really wanted him to play that attacking style, and he bought into it when I actually think he was a better player than that. And then his stats drop off massively at the end when he really should have gone on to play for a lot longer. So there's a bit of era inflation, but he was a very good bat. Go back and have a look. He was a proper number 6, and he was a really he had that sort of wicketkeeper energy of being counter-attacking, but being just a top bat on top of that. I really do. Yeah, I'm very high on him. Sangakkara averages 67 as a non-keeper, which sounds made up. Era inflation again. No. Okay, so I did this in the book, man. You know, I don't want to have to get the book out every time, but I will. I did this in the book of Walcott and Kumar Sangakkara. Both, their averages go through the roof when they give up the gloves. And so your first thought is, okay, so if you give up the gloves, that means you bat better. But Amol Desai and I did a bunch of research on this years ago, and we couldn't find anything in first-class cricket that suggested that giving up the gloves made you a better bat. I'm not saying there wasn't a difference, but it's so marginal, right? And yeah, in Test cricket, we have Walcott, Kumar, McCullum. I could go on. There's a bunch of them, right? BJ Watling is another one, right? They give up the gloves and suddenly they make these runs. What you don't see, though, is those guys, is wicket keepers taking up the gloves when they're in the middle of their peak of their batting. But there is one example of this, and it's AB de Villiers. And so AB de Villiers, let's see if I'm right here, mate. AB de Villiers obviously just starts keeping in the middle of his career randomly. They didn't really like the younger keepers going through. They thought he could do the job at a decent level, so they gave him the gloves. Not a particularly great keeper, partly because he didn't do the job all that much. But that was kind of how they ended up with it. So AB de Villiers averages 50.66 in Test cricket, and as a wicket keeper, he averages 57.41. So does that make him the GOAT? Do you see what I'm saying? So essentially what you are seeing here is people in their peak, not wicket keeping. And if Kumar Sangakkara was to wicket keep in his peak, let's say we flip his career around. He starts as a specialist batter. He then wicket keeps for 40 matches or whatever it was in the middle of his career during his peak. Then he would have better numbers wicket keeping than he would otherwise. It's a bit like when people say people start making more runs when they're captains. Well, captains usually make more runs than non-captains for a couple of reasons. One, they're automatically in the team by that stage, so they're not a fringe player. And two, generally people become a captain between the age of 26 and 32, which is around their peak years. And it's exactly the same for wicket keepers. McCullum doesn't become a better bat when he stops wicket keeping. He can specialize in his batting a little bit more, right? But he's also coming into his peak of his batting years. For a long time, McCullum was trying to work out what kind of batter he wanted to be. And I think it's hard in Test cricket because we don't have a great sample size of people keeping and not keeping, right? But if I was to look at, it'd be interesting to see what Les Ames. So Les Ames is the OG on this, right? He's the first guy who can bat and wicket keep at the same time. He can walk and chew gum at the same time. It is walk and chew gum, is it, that phrase? Anyway, Les Ames is great. Don't ask me how we got into this. So Les Ames, he's got a weird ass career. This doesn't fit very well with Les Ames because his career's a bit up and down. But it doesn't quite work with Les Ames. Let me try Andy Flowers. That's the other one, isn't it? Andy Flower. He probably doesn't play enough Test matches, but we can probably try and do this. Andy Flowers' career is a bit up and down too, I think. But if I could find it with a normal human being, this would be a lot easier. Andy Flower, which is 41. Yeah, okay. Andy Flower, right? So Andy Flower's a really good player when he starts his career, and he averages around the 40s mark for the first 5 years of his career. I think that's right. Then he averages 57, 49, 80, 89 before having one down year on the back end, right? So as designated keeper, he averages 53. And as not a keeper, he averages 33. My guess is, if we have a look at that, he was just keeping in the years he was in form with the bat and probably closer to his peak age. And that's generally what it is. Not everyone, some people have sporadic things. And there is some element, and when you look at it, of some players are not as good in the final innings when they wicket keep because Test matches are longer. Emu says, when will Aaron Hardy earn his rightful place in all three formats of Australian cricket? I just feel, Emu, that even I have had to sell my Aaron Hardy stocks over the years. And I was very, very keen on him. Not even the fact that he was going to play, but the fact that they had him and Green at the same time. Look, he's 27 now. He's still averaging around 40 in first-class cricket. The problem is, where do you fit him in? And I just don't know if his bowling is Test match level, right? It's not bad bowling for first-class cricket, and he's got a better bowling record than Cameron Green in first-class cricket. I'm pretty sure, I think I'm right in saying that. But I think in Test cricket, they just look at it and go, are we getting a worse batter than Shane Watson and a worse bowler than Shane Watson, right? Is maybe how Australia are looking at it. Now that Webster's around, I don't think you need to go Aaron Hardy. If he has a big year with the bat, right? And I don't know what his current stats are. Let me just quickly... Oh, stupid big bash nonsense, isn't it? I can't find his numbers off the top of my head. If he has a big year with the bat this year and next year, as he's reaching his peak, he has a chance of doing a Bo Webster. The issue with his bowling is I just don't know how it fits into modern cricket for limited overs bowling. It actually probably makes more sense in Test cricket if you just want someone to bowl 12 overs a day of nagging, right? Like that sort of Shane Watson, not quite Colin de Grandhomme level, but that sort of nagging type bowler. I think that's fine in Test cricket. But I don't think you're bowling that much in T20 cricket or one-day cricket, really, with his skill set at the moment. So he has to get in with batting almost alone. And, you know, I still think he's a very talented player. I don't think he's quite developed the way that he should have. But let me just have a look. In List A cricket, he's not made any runs in List A cricket. He's averaging 18. And his big bash numbers are 31, 33. Good, but there are better batters around, right? So I don't know. I tried with Aaron Hardy. He hasn't quite developed the way that I hoped he would have. There's still hope for him as a Test player, as a limited overs player. He would have to change the kind of player he is. Anyway, that's me done for the day. Thank you to everyone for hopping on. This is my 4th podcast of the day. Friggin' Iron Man. Come to Combox. You can join our waitlist, combox.tv. Tell all your friends about it, but tell them about the main Combox channel as well, because we've got so much content coming in all the time now. And we really, you know, the more people that back us, the better we can do. So a big shout out to everyone who's already turned up, and we'll see you again very soon for more of this. Combox. The game lives on.